Good afternoon, business leaders and partners. To help open our next session focused on innovation, advocacy, and the future of small business growth, please welcome respected political commentator, strategist, and principal at Dewey Square Group, Ms. Maria Cardona.
Hola. Hi, everyone. ¿Cómo están hoy? Let's get everyone in, settle into your seats. This is going to be a really, really interesting afternoon, as these things always are. Ramiro, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to the USHCC for putting together this summit. It's such a critical time, and I always am in awe of how much the USHCC understands these pivotal moments and these forks in the road, and they always make sure to offer up panel discussions, information, speeches, and the kinds of discussions that we all need to have so that we move forward in a way that we are leveraging the opportunities that are in front of us. And so today is no different. So thank you, Ramiro. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you to the whole team. And so I really want to thank, again, the USHCC for having these kinds of discussions. And I hope everyone has had the opportunity to connect with fellow leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers from across the country. This is specifically what these kinds of events are all about. As the voice of God said, my name is Maria Cardona. I'm a principal at the Dewey Square Group and a political commentator on CNN and CNN Español, and it is always my pleasure to work alongside the USHCC, like I said, for these amazing conversations, much needed at these critical junctures in time. We have an exceptional program ahead, one that focuses on two of the most consequential issues shaping the future of our economy and the opportunities available to America's small businesses: artificial intelligence and international trade. As we all know, Hispanic-owned businesses are among the fastest growing segment of the American economy. They are innovators, job creators, and are the most powerful engine of economic growth. And every time I hear that phrase, I remember my former boss, the very first African-American Commerce Secretary, Ron Brown, would go around the country, would go around the world, and always say that small businesses were the engine and the backbone of economic growth for the United States. And then he and I would talk separately, and he would always say, Maria, I know that Hispanic businesses are going to end up being the ones that are the engine of that economic growth. And he was right, and here we are. And we know that the growth among Latino businesses is emerging as record numbers, and it is, as small businesses, Latino small businesses go, so goes the economy of this great country. We also know that Hispanic-owned businesses are among the ones that are always at the forefront of what is coming in terms of innovation. But to continue thriving, they must have a seat at the table as policies are developed around emerging technologies and evolving relationships. So we're going to begin with our National AI Framework Panel. This discussion is going to be where industry experts and policy leaders are going to examine how a national artificial intelligence framework is taking shape and what it means for small businesses. We all know that AI is transforming the way companies operate, streamlining processes, improving customer engagement, and opening up new doors for growth. Our panel is going to explore how small businesses can harness this technology responsibly and competitively while ensuring that they are not left behind as new regulations and standards emerge. A lot of people are very concerned about where this AI technology is going, how it's going to treat communities that are traditionally left behind. So again, I believe that we are at a crossroads where Latino businesses can be at the forefront of how AI technology gets adopted in this country and around the world. Following that, we're honored to welcome Aaron Parnas for a special fireside chat. Aaron has built an extraordinary platform by making complex policy and legal issues accessible to millions of Americans. His conversation today will offer valuable insights into how the digital media landscape is shaping public understanding and how small business leaders can strategically use these tools while navigating today's rapidly changing media environment. We're then going to turn our attention to one of the most important drivers of prosperity for our business community today, and that's trade. Our two keynotes will spotlight the tremendous opportunities created through the rewrite of the USMCA and international trade. North America remains one of the most dynamic and integrated economic regions in the world, and Hispanic-owned businesses are uniquely positioned to expand across borders, strengthen supply chains, and deepen commercial ties with key partners in Mexico and Canada. These keynote conversations will highlight how trade can unlock new markets, increase competitiveness, and create lasting economic opportunities for entrepreneurs and communities throughout the hemisphere. So taken together, this afternoon's program is about preparing our businesses for the future, equipping them with the knowledge, the tools, and the relationships they need to continue innovating, growing, and leading. Thank you so much for being here. Gracias por estar aquí. Thank you for your commitment to advancing the success of Hispanic businesses all across the United States and the world. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Cardona. Distinguished guests, we now turn our attention to the evolving national framework surrounding artificial intelligence and its impact on small businesses, innovation, and digital governance. To introduce and moderate our next panel discussion, please welcome Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution, Mr. Xavier Briggs, followed by our expert panelists.
Thank you so much, everybody. Is this on? You hear me okay? Great. Excited to be in this conversation today. Artificial intelligence is seemingly on everybody's mind. It's got so many implications for us as parents, as business owners, community leaders. Many of you probably wear all of those hats. I am joined by an absolutely fantastic group. Let me introduce them, and we will get right into it, into the conversation. To my left is Hensi Fenton III. Hensi is Deputy General Counsel for Privacy and Digital Governance at Comcast. Paula Farani Azevedo Silveira, did I get it close? Is Director of AI Policy for Meta. And to Paula's left is Simon Morrison, Senior Public Policy Manager for AI and Privacy Policy at Amazon. So folks, thank you very much for being with us today. I want to start by observing that while AI is in the news, it's in our lives already, it's in our economy, there seems to be a development every day, if not every hour. It's a lot to follow. We don't have, and hence I want to throw this first question to you, we don't have a national legislative framework, or let me say that differently, we don't have enacted law yet that provides a policy framework. The Trump administration released a proposed template, if you will, for national policy back in March and has made policy statements since. But businesses, large and small, communities have not had national law really to fall back on quite yet. And my first question to each of you is, how have your companies dealt with that? I mean, how have you approached this powerful, emerging, still evolving technology in lieu of a framework? And can you give us a quick example of what it's looked like to try to make progress?
Yeah, so one of the things I do at Comcast is I lead our AI governance program at the company. And so because there's no national framework, we kind of have to boil the ocean. We take this boil the ocean approach that's really, really time consuming and costs a lot of money to ensure that we're properly mitigating the risk associated with deploying this really cool and awesome technology, right? I like to say when folks think about Comcast, they say, okay, you guys are a cable company. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But we also own NBC Universal. We own the Universal Studios, the parks as well. So we're deploying AI in really cool ways, but that comes with the risk, right? And so without a federal framework, we have to, at our inception, right, one of the world's largest AI deployers. So step one is procurement, right? So when we're working with OpenAI and Anthropic and all these developers, when we're to deploy their technology, we got to say, like, we don't believe in this black box, right? Where they set the rules and we have to just accept what they've done. We need to know, hey, like, have you red team and audited your tools, right? Have you used unbiased and representative data to train your tools?
Nancy, just to clarify, the they in that sentence is the big model developers.
Yes, the big model developers, right? And so we go through this back and forth with our procurement team. And so once we get our terms and get them the way that we want them, where we can contract around the risk, right? Because without a federal framework, we don't know where liability starts and we don't know where it ends. Once we get there, then we get to the internal piece where you have folks like me who review every single AI initiative or use case that's coming through. And we review it and we assess the risk there. And then at the end of that, right, because one of the things that I think we're kind of putting pieces together from regulatory memos and blog posts from the FTC, right? One of the things they always say is that just because when you deploy a technology, it looks like it works well, you have to continually monitor it, right? So we also deploy this technology where we can actually see what we can see what the AI tools are doing day to day to ensure that they're actually operating the way that they're supposed to. So avoiding hallucinations, avoiding incorrect outputs and things like that.
Super helpful. I appreciate you guys bearing with me. We'll make this lightning round, but you're saying in lieu of a national framework, you both buy as responsibly and carefully as you can and ask lots of questions up front.
Exactly.
And then you're also doing your own internal product development and monitoring.
Exactly.
Paula, how about you guys?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we do is similar to what Hensi just said. I think one difference would be that we are, at Meta. Well, first, let me start by saying hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here. So I am an AI policy director at Meta, and what I observe at Meta is that since this is an innovative technology, we are at the frontier of what's coming. And to be honest, I don't know if we need a national framework, if it might be a little too soon, especially because the technology is evolving so quickly. We don't really know what the next year looks like.
We don't know how to govern it?
We don't know what?
We don't know how to govern it, or at least how to make law?
No, not that. You don't know what the use case is going to be. So I would caution to be a little bit more, if we are going to have a framework, for it to be a little broader and to contemplate the fact that we don't know what this technology is going to be used for generally by consumers, by enterprises. And so we want to be cautious that a framework will not restrict innovation.
Yep.
That's what I would say. So what are we doing, right? Because obviously we're not just...
Waiting.
Huh?
Waiting.
We're not just waiting.
No, you're not waiting.
Right? We're not waiting, and we're not just also developing willy-nilly. I think a lot of it is industry standards. So we are a part of several industry organizations, C2PA, FMF, which is the Frontier Model Forum, the Partnership on AI, and these are all industry-led, some of them standard-setting bodies, others just forums for discussion of what are the best practices, how do we mitigate risk, what are the risks. We also have an extensive research team that is not only working on how to develop the technology, but how to make it safe. So when our researchers find something, for example, they find a certain way for a new prompt injection to occur in the wild, they will publish that. And we open source a lot of our technology and our data sets and our model evaluations to ensure that not only are we building responsibly, but that everyone else that is building also has access to these mitigations.
Thank you. Super helpful. So, I mean, you both stressed responsible development and deployment so far. Paula, you also reminded us that governance doesn't just come from government. Industry has a long history of these conversations within the sector to figure out standards, et cetera. And that also provides a helpful reference point for lawmakers, among other values. Simon, how about you guys? How are you approaching this in lieu of there being a legal framework nationally?
So both other panelists have made great points, to which I would just add that while we are very much in favor, as Amazon, of a federal framework, this is not an empty space. Existing law is good, right? Consumer protection law, privacy law, and so on and so forth. And sectoral regulators already today have the power to enforce the statutes under their purview when it involves uses and development of AI, right? So we think that there's not an empty space there, no. We have a lot of experience working under those existing legislative and regulatory frameworks. And then, in addition, we have a long-term experience building responsible AI practice, right? And we, like Paula was saying of Meta, we publish a great deal of our research, and we publish a great deal of our thinking about how to develop this sort of thing. In addition to participating in industry forums, I'd also add that NIST has the risk management framework along with other materials for businesses to consult to ensure that they're building responsibly. So I think there are benefits which we'll probably get into further in this conversation to a federal framework in the US, but there's already quite a lot that we can look to as businesses if we're trying to design safe and secure AI for our customers.
Simon, thanks for stressing that. It's a perfect segue to the next part of the conversation, and that is, what, in your view, would be particularly useful, particularly important in new law, in additional legislation, above and beyond some of the existing statutes that you referred to, which are foundational. They're very, very fundamental to how the marketplace works. We stick with you, and then we'll just come back down.
So I think as a first principle, we should look at existing law and identify the gaps. And I think that there are some gaps. You could probably look at certain what have been called high-risk use cases, for example, in Colorado's AI Act, to see are there transparency or risk assessment requirements that developers and deployers need to fulfill in those sorts of cases. Right now, obviously, in the news, the risk of frontier systems, powerful frontier systems to cybersecurity and other areas is, a major issue. So frontier safety might be an area that is not already well covered by the law, and which seems really appropriate for the federal government, which has the resources, has expertise in NIST and the Department of Commerce, and covers the entire nation. You're building frontier models, not with respect to state lines or even international borders.
I feel like you were alluding to something that's worth flagging for our audience today, and that is Anthropic's release of Mythos, super tool. Certainly a very powerful AI agent for detecting vulnerabilities, and it now has provoked a lot of private response, and even the Trump administration to say, wait a second, we need to rethink cybersecurity a little bit, and who gets to decide when these super, super powerful frontier models are released, and that raises questions of how they're tested and what's disclosed, et cetera. Paula, your view and Meta's view, what could we most use from a national legislative framework of enacted law?
So I think key word there is national, right? So federal framework makes the most sense.
Rather than a patchwork of state?
Yes, definitely. As Simon was saying, these are not models that are being built for a specific state, for a specific country even. So that, I think, is essential. And then what do we want to see in there? We want to see clarity. We want to see consistency, and we want to see incentives. So we need clear rules, we need consistency, because obviously we're not developing for next week, we're developing over a long time span. And we need incentives not only for innovation, for development, but also for adoption. It is critical that that society and business owners specifically reap the economic benefits that accrue from AI. And for that to happen, I think more quickly, we should have incentives for adoption.
Nancy.
So I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. everyone talked about the federal framework and we don't want a patchwork. We want preemption. That's what we want from an AI federal framework. It needs to preempt the states because a lot of states have already passed AI ADMT rules of the road, and we don't want to have what happened with privacy happen with AI.
Nancy, just say a little bit more for those who may not be in and out, the keywords, the legislative finery. What is preemption? Why is that appropriate in a context like this?
So for example, preemption just means at the federal level, it'll prevent states from passing laws that govern and dictate the same exact thing that the federal government is trying to legislate around with the legislation at hand. So what usually happens, for example, for privacy, there are 23, I think, privacy laws in the states right now. So that's 23 laws that small businesses and businesses have to abide by when they're trying to expand across the states, right? We don't want that to happen with AI. We don't want 30 different AI laws in 30 different jurisdictions that we have to comply with. We want one uniform federal framework that preempts those state laws.
Gotcha.
Zav, might I just make a brief response?
Please.
This might suggest a difference, but friction is always good on a panel, which is that I totally agree, or mostly agree. I will say that there are consumer protection related and other areas where we at Amazon think it would make sense for the states to continue to legislate. I think what we are looking at are these sorts of big picture and especially developer-focused, although perhaps not exclusively developer-focused laws that would be highly burdensome for these systems that are, these models that are being built for national, international uses, as opposed to use case focused and consumer protection focused laws that might be the purview of the states. You think about, we'd have to look on a case by case basis, but employment, health, policing, these sorts of questions.
And so when you say preemption, usually legally, the federal government can't preempt police powers or powers that reside within the states. So that's why even each state has their own, what they call mini FTC acts, which allow them to enforce consumer protection laws at the state level. So it wouldn't preempt that because it can't preempt that. But another thing from the federal framework, one of the things from as a large deployer and not a developer, we want some accountability, right? We want a federal framework to say a developer or a deployer is not responsible for certain hallucinations or consumer harms that are associated with a tool that we didn't have insight in developing. And currently there's nothing that sets that standard, right? So as a deployer, we're really scared, right? When we start contracting with some of these developers and they refuse to tell us some of that information because they say that's business practices we don't want to divulge to our customers, et cetera, et cetera. When in reality, we just want to know that the technology that we're going to deploy that's going to interact with consumers isn't going to harm consumers, and we're going to be liable for something that we couldn't have predicted in the future.
Thank you both for teasing this out a little bit more for us. Paolo, I just want to give you an opportunity if you want to weigh in on this issue of preemption, what lives at the federal versus closer to communities.
No, I think on the preemption piece, I think we're very closely aligned with what Hensi said. On the liability, I would just add that, while I understand the hesitancy and the concerns, I would argue that for most of the issues, there already exists some sort of regulation and liability standards. So maybe we may have to see some specific issues that may not be under some sort of either consumer protection law or payments regulation. But I feel like for the most part, we're already covered with a liability framework that can be applied.
So just a quick follow-up to that. I think one of the bigger issues here is that what plaintiffs' lawyers are going to do, right? They're going to use existing torts claims to pursue actions against deployers, right? And they're going to say, well, this technology that you deployed in a consumer context harmed said consumer, so it's your fault as a deployer. And then oftentimes what will happen is the deployer will say, these are all again hypothetically, will say, well, it's not our fault. We didn't know that the technology was going to malfunction and do this. We didn't build this technology. The only thing we did was contract with a developer and deployed it, right? And we had certain contractual provisions in place and some certain guarantees, but those are just guarantees. It's not our fault that the tool itself malfunctioned, right? And so I think that's when we're talking about having those accountability frameworks laid out in a federal statute that spells out where liability starts and where it ends when it comes to deploying that AI technology.
Understood. So this one certainly is a topic for longer conversation.
Sorry.
It's not without some complexity and huge stakes.
Yeah.
For companies, for families, for consumers, and certainly for small business. I want to pivot us in the time remaining. We've got about 7 minutes left, y'all. I want to talk about stakes for small business specifically.
Yes.
Most businesses in this country are small,
Yeah.
right? 99% of businesses in this country are not large companies like Comcast, Amazon, Meta. Your roles are immensely important, we're learning in this conversation, but the backbone, as was said earlier, of the economy in so many ways, and most employment, is small and mid-sized businesses. Briefly, I'll put two questions to each of you, and we'll see if we can wrap here. Number one, what's the value of a national framework for small businesses? What does it do for them as opposed to your companies, let's say? What key things stand out? And also, in a marketplace that seemingly is evolving, minute by minute and is complex to navigate, what should small businesses know about seizing opportunity, not waiting too long to garner opportunity from AI, but also not making the wrong bets or being taken advantage of?
Yeah.
Nancy, let's start with you.
So I did some homework before this panel. My partner, she comes from a big Cuban family in South Florida. So very rare, of course, everybody, we know that. A family of small business owners. And so I text the family group chat and I said, hey guys, I'm speaking on this panel at the Hispanic Chamber. How are you guys thinking about AI? And so my partner, she laughed and she said, they're not gonna say anything. What the hell? You think my mom's gonna know what they're doing with AI? So her aunt responds and she says her aunt owns a medical billing company in Naples, Florida. The family has owned it for the past 20 or so years. And she says, well, my business is a medical business and we already are seeing the impact of AI. All of our softwares are slowly moving towards AI. My provider is implementing G-Scribe, which means he will be speaking and AI will dictate his charts. Initially, yes, costly, but I believe it will be more efficient. I have used Claude for all of my financial reporting for the last couple of months. Very impressive. I believe I pay $250 a year and it's worth it. So as a small business owner, AI is making me look like a Fortune 500 company. Oh. That to me
is the promise.
That's the promise, right? And we need to. And as one of the things that I wanted to say, and again, I think that we need to be pushing the federal government outside of a federal framework to build incentivize to incentivize programs that help small businesses deploy AI with examples like this, right? I don't know, it could be things coming from the SBA, coming from the Commerce Department, because what I didn't say is, as a follow-up, her mom responded and said, wow, I haven't thought about that at all. And I asked her, I said, why is that? And she goes, oh, because it scares me, I'm afraid, I'm I'm a little older, that's your generation. And she should be thinking like her younger sister, right? Because AI has the same capabilities for her business as it has for Tia's business as well.
And so you got to jump in 1 second because the clock is ticking down. But no, that's really helpful and incredible from just one entrepreneur too. Yeah. That's an incredible window. Top thing to beware, in your view, if you're a small business person.
If I was, I know we had a prep call and I used snake oil salesman. Beware of the snake oil.
There's plenty of room to be one, right?
I know, it really is, right? Because it's a hot market. Everyone has these promises that they can do any and everything with AI. I say beware of those developers because they're not tried and true. Go to your larger developers who are going to have a much discounted rate, right? And who, from a transparency perspective, are going to actually have an entire, I call them like 1 or 2 pages that spell out what the technology does, what it's going to be doing for your business. I think my favorite, not to shout out another tech company, but there's a commercial from Microsoft where this guy goes into Copilot and says, I want to bring back $5 slices, right? I can't afford to do that. How do I do this? And Copilot goes through all of its financials and gives him a proposed business plan to get back to $5 slices, right? That's a tried and true model that is being deployed at countless businesses across the
Business strategy making.
business strategy.
Very specific.
So beware of the snake oil salesman, and I say go with the bigger, tried and true tech companies who are deploying this technology at scale and who answer to large deployers like ourselves, right? And so have to meet certain standards in order to work with larger businesses like us. So we do the work for you and push them to disclose certain things and make certain promises that a small business can.
That's important because there isn't a good housekeeping seal for now,
No.
right? There isn't something quite like the underwriter's laboratory seal that tells you an electrical product is safe, or an Energy Star label, right? Things that we've come to know over the years. Simon, same question to you.
So very briefly, Amazon, small business is the lifeblood of Amazon. 60% of our sales on the Amazon market come from, are done by small businesses. Small businesses in the US selling on Amazon employed 2 million people last year. So it's a huge part of our business. We've implemented a large number of tools for those businesses. We've conducted research with the business owners. They find that it's increasing efficiency, among many other benefits. One business owner said to us that it increases his time by 20 because he's just able to perform many functions faster. Very briefly, because I know we're running short here, just on how to implement safely. This builds on something Henzi said. You can start small one. You can work with tools that integrate into systems you already use, right? Which leverages the people you already trust to learn what the new tools are. And when you're starting, figure out your data sources, data owners, and access before starting so that you know what you're looking at when you go into it. I could say more, but I know we're running short here.
Thank you, Simon. Paula, last word to you.
Yeah, I want to say two very quick things. I think just to echo what Simon just said about go where you already are. I think at Meta, we see great success for those who are already on our platform, are already advertising with Meta. And we have a bunch of tools for caption generation, for image editing, for helping you find your audience. And we see a significant difference on advertisers on our platform that use use the AI to do their content creation and their ads versus the ones that don't. And the second thing that I would say, and it's not directly what you asked, but I think that since it's a legislative summit, I think this is important, is small and medium businesses need to talk to their representatives. This is crucial because that story that you just told, so many businesses have the same story. And representatives will only know what they need to legislate on if they understand how this technology is being used and how valuable it is for small, medium businesses. So at Meta, we have a small business day, and we bring a lot of our small business leaders to Congress to talk to their representatives, tell them about how they're using the technology, what do they need from Congress. And that's important because if your representative is thinking about legislating, the most influential thing is not us, large companies going in there. It's their constituents telling them what they need in order to be more efficient, in order to make more money and employ more people.
We need to end it there. It's a great note to end on. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Colleagues and friends, we now turn to a fireside chat, leveraging social media for advocacy, growth, and community. A conversation with journalist and founder of the Parnas Perspective, Aaron Parnas. To lead the discussion is the founder of Success Unlocked, Ms. Trixie Castro. Please welcome them both to our stage.
Hello, everybody. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm super excited. I am going to interview Aaron with some really great questions that I think you're going to find at least I found very tactical and very helpful. What you've built and what you've done in such a short amount of time is like next level. That's the only way I can describe it. So you went from a securities litigation attorney to now one of the most viewed and heard voices on the news, which is incredible. Walk us through that pivot.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I never wanted to do. I was 2 years out of law school in 2022, and Russia invaded Ukraine. And at the time, I had family on the ground in Kyiv, and they would be sharing what they were experiencing every day. My little cousin was sleeping in a bathtub with the mattress over her head as bombs were going off. And I was watching media here in the United States, and I felt as though that there was a disconnect, right, with what they were experiencing on the ground and what we were learning here in the United States. And then at the same time, I was scrolling TikTok, and I realized so many people my age couldn't even point Ukraine out on a map. And they were just interested in the first real war that Generation Z kind of grew up in. And so I opened up my own account, started making videos about what my family was experiencing, and in a week had 1 million followers interested in Ukraine.
Wow.
And then the rest is kind of history. So I just fell into it.
That's incredible. I mean, and now you've turned it into something so huge. So I understand you're posting about 24 TikToks a day.
Yes.
Not an easy task.
No.
Incredible. So for those of us small and medium-sized business owners that already feel exhausted by 9 a.m., we're like, how in the world are we supposed to do one more thing? What is something that still works that isn't 24 times a day, right? What's something that would still amount-wise?
So I think the biggest thing is just consistency, whether it's once a day or once every 3 days or twice a week, whatever the schedule is, you just stick to the schedule and the platform will reward you. So it doesn't have to be 20 times a day. It doesn't have to be once a day. It could be as often or as not as often as you want, as long as you're consistent. Okay. And the platform rewards consistency.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's such a misconception to so many people out there, where they think it has to be this huge number or this like massive undertaking, but you're living proof that you made it happen and you've grown it organically in such an incredible way.
Yeah, I mean, organic growth is the way to go. I really don't recommend anyone pay to like boost their videos or whatever. Just, I think, be yourself on the internet. Really tell your business's story in the way that your business tells it, not like any other business does, and you'll succeed.
It's incredible. Now, you've had some really high-profile people come and interview with you. Yes. I mean, from governors, senators, incredible. How does someone with a fraction of the audience size that you have get their attention?
By reaching out to them. I mean, truly.
Wow. That's amazing.
When I started, I emailed every single member of Congress's communication staffer that I wanted to talk to. And I built relationships over months and now over years. And now I'm getting the interviews. These interviews didn't happen just because I'm big now today. It took a lot of work over time. And so build the relationship over time, but really just like pester them and continue to email them and continue to reach out to them. Something that I like to do, for example, the White House. If you want to reach anyone in the White House, their email is at eop.whitehouse.gov, I believe it is. And you could just kind of play around and with their first initial, last name, last name, until you find one that goes through. It's how I got to the press secretary. It works.
That's incredible. So the savvy business tactics are really similar to what you're using every single day on your social platforms.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Okay, let's see. I'll actually stick to the questions that I'm supposed to ask. Okay, what's the difference between educational, informative content and content that gets you to take the action? How do you stop someone from scrolling to doing?
Well, I think the hook is the most important thing. I think people in this day and age, me especially, I have this like an attention span of a squirrel, and that like I'll watch something for 5 seconds, and if I don't like it, I'll move on. Even TV shows, if I don't like a TV show within the first 5 minutes, I won't watch it, and it's very problematic. But I think when you're scrolling on social media and when you're making content, you have to have a really good hook that grasps the attention within the first 5 seconds. So for me, I have the same line I say in every single video. It's just, we have some news. That's the first thing I say in every video.
Every time.
Every time, thousands of videos, thousands of times. And over time, that is the hook that draws people in. So just find your hook.
And as people continue to find their hook, do you feel like the messaging changes every single time, or that's, okay?
No, it's just consistent. I mean, there's some people that will just like scream, stop scrolling in the camera. And then it makes me stop scrolling. And then I like listen, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I don't know, like just find something creative.
And how often are you watching other people's content for inspiration?
Now, never. I just don't have the time with a newborn and working 24/7 right now. Before I used to a lot more, but now I just don't have the time.
So a ton of people want to know, when you first started, this is so out of the box, right? You were a litigation attorney, completely structured your day, you knew what you were doing. This is so different. That shift and that adjustment, business owners struggle with daily.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it actually wasn't that big of a shift because as a litigation attorney, I was telling a story in a courtroom, right? And now I'm telling a story on the internet, just to a much larger jury. Not 12 people, but 10 million people. So the shift changed in the platform that I'm using, but ultimately it's the same job, just shorter and to a bigger audience.
So that leads me to my next question. There's so many different platforms, right? Instagram, Substack, TikTok, you name it. What's something that a small to mid-sized business owner can focus on today that will move the needle for them?
I think that TikTok and Instagram you have to be there because those are the platforms that have a natural algorithm right now that will push your content out even if you have 0 followers. A platform like Substack, bootstrapping it is very difficult. So Instagram and TikTok, and then cross-posting that onto Facebook. If you do that consistently, you'll be fine.
Cross-posting the exact same post?
Exact same post.
Okay, so people didn't need to reinvent the wheel. They can absolutely utilize the platforms.
Cross-posted. The people watching you on TikTok are going to be different from Instagram, different from Facebook.
I love that you talked about you're telling a story, right? Because all of us business owners, we have our story. We have our business's story. We know what we're trying to convey. And for some reason, what happens when that camera is on us, it's deer in headlights, right? Like it's got to be scripted. Did you experience that?
Yes and no. I mean, I experienced less the deer in the headlights, but more of the, oh my God, my friends are going to think I'm so embarrassing by just like when I'm talking into a camera. You get over that pretty quickly. Yeah. And I also, I mean, people told me growing up that like, if they think you're embarrassing or if they laugh at you, that means like you're doing something that no one's ever done before, and then you're going to laugh at them one day.
That's right.
So
you're like, who's laughing now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you've built Substack with over 600,000 subscribers. Pretty impressive. Not to mention your social following, which is in the millions. Let's talk about owning your audience and what that means versus having that risk of just posting on one platform.
Yeah, I mean, so I think owning your audience to me means building a brand that's unique to you. So for example, I'll give it a good example of what I think a business did recently that's really good. So HelloFresh, giant business, right? They didn't make a video with someone on camera. They responded to, remember the DoorDash delivery driver thing at the White House? So they put up just a one, I don't know, frame picture with like 3 lines of text saying, "We don't deliver to the White House," something like that or whatever. It was just like a joke. Their thing went so viral. They got 30,000 new followers, millions and millions of views. Creators like me, I took it and I made a video for them and got them more followers, and then we started working together. That fit their brand. It was unique to them. And I think other businesses, you have to just do what's unique to you and build your brand. And I think that's how you own your audience.
That's incredible. Is there a risk to only doing one platform that you don't control?
Yeah, because then you're missing out on such an audience, an audience elsewhere. You have to be everywhere to reach more people.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Now, let's talk about, you've had great success in really tough conversations and getting the needle to move. And so I know many of the business owners here today are dealing with some really tough topics, right? From, capital, right, to reform, to immigration reform, to tax policy. How do you get to do that online, right? How do you get that messaging?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it all goes back to storytelling. It really does. I think you have to assume that your audience doesn't know what you're talking about. And that's when I was a lawyer, I walked into a courtroom and I wasn't talking to 12 other lawyers. I was talking to 12 others, everyday teachers, carpenters, people who have never heard of the law before. Mm-hmm. And so you have to take these complex topics that you're so knowledgeable on and break it down in easily understandable ways. Same thing for you as a business. You know what you do, you know what you want to get across, but the person watching you doesn't know you. So introduce yourself as though, like, don't use, for example, don't use acronyms, right? Like, just break it down a little bit. Don't assume that people know who someone is that works for you. Really tell a story that's very easy to understand.
And how often do you have to reintroduce yourself and the topics?
Now, not anymore. But early on, I would do it every month. I'd be like, hey, this is who I am. And like, this is my background. And here's why I think you should listen to me. And then eventually, I mean, now I don't have to do it, but before I did.
That's incredible. As a small and mid-sized business owner, how do you measure the success that you're having on social media?
I think for me, it's not views, but rather conversions to whatever you want, whether it's going to a website, subscribing to a newsletter, buying a product, visiting whatever it is. I think looking at that conversion metric is how you 10% to 15% conversion. That's where you want to be. I mean, it sounds low, but it's actually a lot.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, like a lot of people are like, well, I want 1 million followers. I'm like, okay, great. But if you have 1 million followers and only 10 of them buy your product, is that really better than having 1,000 followers with 1,000 people that buy your product? No, it's not. You have to find people that you have to look at high conversion rate rather than high followers or high views.
So much of what we do in business is data driven.
Yeah.
And I think that really applying that data, like you just described, into this growth opportunity really does move the needle. I agree with you.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, and so many times we get so stuck on the, like, in the weeds, if you will, rather than let's focus on what we can do with the data.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I think a lot of people, you'll go viral once. You'll get a video that gets 100,000 views, and you're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And then the next 10 videos will get maybe 1,000 views each. And you're like, am I doing something wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. It's just the nature of social media. And sometimes those 1,000-view videos will convert more business for you than the 100,000 video will. I mean, it just depends.
You know, you talked about consistency. Can you give us an example for a small to mid-sized business, what that consistency should look at to start out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, for example, plan a calendar out. I mean, right? So, like, at the beginning of every month, look at the month ahead, look at what events you're having, look at what things are happening out in the world, and plan out, okay, so on Monday the 5th, we're going to do this video. On Tuesday the 6th, we're going to do this video. And batch record as well. Create batch content. Take an hour and record 6 pieces of content and then spread it out over a week. And that helps tremendously with consistency. That way you're not waking up every morning thinking, oh my God, I have to film something. No, you can do it in batch form. And then also hire someone young, truly, and have them go through trends on TikTok and like find trends that you would do and just do them and be open to doing them.
So true. How important is high production, or can you just do this like off of an iPhone?
Oh, I don't edit anything. For me to post a video, it takes 2 minutes, between a minute of recording and then a minute of uploading based on where I am in the world and the Wi-Fi speed. That's it.
Wow. So we all have that time, right? We all can do that. So it's a big scary sometimes, right? For business owners, it's our baby. We've worked so hard to build this business. We have our authentic brand. How do you stay true to your authenticity while building on a social platform?
I think you have to not be scared. I mean, truly, I think so many business owners especially are scared of like, oh my God, I'm going to say something that's going to get me canceled and people aren't going to come to my business anymore. It's my livelihood. I get it. But if you want to succeed, you have to take some risks. And being authentic is taking a risk in a lot of respects. So if you naturally curse online, like who cares? Like truly, I mean, like whatever it is, like be true to yourself. Don't try to be, I live by the motto, perfect is the enemy of good. Don't try to be perfect because you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, and so many times we think we have to be perfect at everything that we're doing.
Correct.
Along with solving, world peace.
Well, yeah, I mean, and like, for example, one of the traps I've seen businesses and organizations fall into, they're like, okay, well, we have 365 days in the year. I don't even know how many days there are in the year anymore. Whatever, you have a certain amount of days in the year, and you have 90 holidays, a bunch of federal holidays, so many of these state holidays. There's 90 pieces of content. We're going to post on every holiday. And I look at them and I'm like, why would you do that? Like, who the hell cares that you're going to celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas and Kwanzaa? Like, no one is paying attention to that. But they care that you are posting things about your business. Just because you're trying to check a box that you're posting doesn't mean that you're actually doing anything to advance the ball in any meaningful way.
That's so true. And we see so many businesses grow when they do exactly what you're saying, when they post about their business and they solve the problem. Because you have to assume if you have a problem, others do too, right? So showing how you navigate that and being authentic really makes a huge difference. Okay, back to year one when you started this, all right? What is something that you wish you knew then that you know now?
That social media is a scary place. and that there are a lot of people who are not nice online. I mean, truly, I don't read my comments anymore for my own mental health. I think that, and also I think people will look for any way to bring you down. As you grow, there are going to be people who are going to want to stifle that growth at every single opportunity. And don't take it personally. And also, a lot of the people you thought were close to you at the time you started, jealousy will brew. And eventually, you'll grow apart, and that's normal. And I think recognizing that is important.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah. Well, we are out of time. I could sit and chat with you for a whole other hour and ask questions, but thank you so much for educating us on this.
Business leaders and USHCC partners, at this time, to help us welcome our keynote speaker, give a warm round of applause to CEO of Encantado Advisors and Chair-elect of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Victor Arias.
Buenas tardes. Órale, buenas tardes. Okay, much better, much better. It's my pleasure. First of all, thanks everybody for coming. Great turnout. And as Maria Cardona earlier talked about was the importance of trade, the importance of the USMCA. So it's been really inspiring today to see how aligned we are around a common purpose, building an economy that is driven by Hispanic businesses. We can start and grow and compete globally. We need to think about us as a global player. A major part of that engagement is under the USMCA. So when you go tomorrow to talk to your legislators, you have to talk about the USMCA and how important that is for keeping Latino businesses front and center. For many of our members, cross-border trade, it's just not an abstract concept. It's natural. It's like when people ask, do you dream in Spanish or do you dream in English? Well, it's a switch. It happens. It's the daily reality of moving goods, providing services, and building relationships with trust that span the U.S. and Mexico. When we talk about supply chains, nearshoring, and economic resiliency, we're talking about opportunities that can fuel all of us. And by all of us, it's not just border states, it's the entire country. Every one of us that are here with chambers from Florida to New Mexico to Maine to Seattle. I mean, the trade impacts all of us. So that's why the next speaker is so important. Our speaker today has helped shape Mexico's economic trajectory and understands firsthand the promise and the complexity of the deepening integration in North America. His experience offers invaluable insight into how we can turn trade policy into growth that reaches small and medium-sized enterprises on both sides of the border. For more than 3 decades, Ildefonso Guajardo has served in various public positions, specializing in international trade, trade negotiations, economic competition, industrial policy, and regulatory reform. He began his career as the chief economist of the Brazil section and the associate economist in the Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF. And subsequently, he was appointed director of the NAFTA Agreement Office at the Mexico Embassy here in D.C. Throughout his career, he has held several management positions at the federal and public levels, including Secretary of Tourism, the Chief Clerk of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and head of the Office of the Governor of Nuevo León. Guajardo served as the Secretary of the Economy of Mexico from 2012 to 2018, where he coordinated the design and implementation of industrial policy, foreign trade, support for small and medium enterprises, business regulations, mining, etc. He earned a BA in economics from the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León, a master's in economics from Arizona State University, and he has pursued doctoral studies in public finance and economics at the University of Pennsylvania. So it is my distinct honor to introduce El Secretario Ildefonso Guajardo.
Hola, buenas tardes. Well, It is an honor to be here, and thanks to my good friend Ramiro Cavazos, who has been always a tremendous ally for the good causes of Mexico and the US and the relationship. Well, I just have 15 minutes with you because I will like an hour, but you are very scarce of time. But let me just start by saying that when I first arrived in this city with the first agreement back in 1991, I have been given two responsibilities. One was to work with the Hispanic community to get their support for the first trade agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada. And the second one was to concentrate specifically in the agricultural sector and the auto sector of Mexico and the US. Believe it or not, Mexico for too long had not really concentrated in how to strengthen our relationship with the Hispanic community. The views back then were not really according to the times. I do remember that the effort to get close to LULAC, to NALEO, to the Consejo Nacional de la Raza, to the Hispanic Chamber, the Mexican government had not given time or effort to really get to work with the Hispanic community in the US. And we have to start from the very beginning on how to win the trust. One of the basic elements that the Mexican government did not understand back then is that in this approach, you have to think, there is a community that has Latin America and Mexico particularly close to their heart. But basically, they are American citizens. And you have to engage, first of all, respecting their position and trying to win their trust. And so it took a big effort back in the 90s to get the support of Hispanic congressmen to really rally for the free trade agreement between Mexico and the US. The first framework that we built together basically was a success for the three countries involved. But we have to admit that there were a lot of elements that were not dealt with in the right way. And one of those elements was how to really get the incredible benefits that were produced with this agreement to really drain down to the small business enterprises in the US and Mexico. At the beginning, it was obviously the tremendous impact in exports, in foreign investment. But most of the benefits were accrued to the big corporations because we were not able back then to really do our homework, basically in Mexico, to liberalize the market for energy, financial markets, to really let this windfall of new things to come close to the small and medium business in both countries. This time around, the challenge is even bigger because I led the negotiations for the today USMCA to rescue the NAFTA agreement of the 90s, and it was not easy. Back then in the 90s, there were three leaders, George Bush, Salinas, and the Prime Minister of Canada, that they were thinking in the same lines of global economies, of free markets, that trade deficits were not the only story in this integration. And it was easy to engage because the three countries were basically reading from the same textbook. It was the challenge that I had to face to really start negotiating with the new administration in the US that basically thought that the first agreement was a disaster and that the trade deficits by themselves were not good news for the US, and that really wanted to bring back manufacturing to the US economy. Sometimes these goals, I can understand them. I definitely agree with Mr. Trump that it was a mistake in the 80s, late 80s or 90s, to let go basically manufacturing to Asia. When Asia was admitted to the World Trade Organization, unfortunately, it was in year 2000, it was just 6 years into the North American Free Trade Agreement. And the big loss of US manufacturing jobs happened exactly in that point. The Rust Belt states had to suffer closing of plants. But in politics, sometimes, it's easier to pick on a weaker neighbor. And for most of the campaign, it was Mexico to blame for the loss of jobs. I'll give you an example where that statement is wrong. For instance, in the US, you used to make tornillos, tuercas, and all these things, so what we call ferreterias or hardware stores. And when China came in, was basically disappearing all that manufacturing. Well, a Mexican businessman bought 2 plants, one in Texas and one in Arkansas, to build those type of inputs using Mexican steel. Thanks to the joint effort, we were able to protect North American production vis-a-vis the Chinese production. That's why even today, you still have US marks, thanks to the joint effort of Mexican steel and US manufacturing. So there is a different story to be told. Today, the world, basically, in this context, they asked me to talk about which context we're facing this negotiating. And one of the biggest things is not going to change is the US challenge with China. Regardless of who wins the next US election, either Democrats or Republicans, the challenge is going to be there for the future. If you follow closely Mr. Trump's trip to China, the Chinese message is very clear. In the first part of that message, Mr. Xi Jinping made a reference to a trap assigned to a Greek philosopher, which is very weird that the Chinese president is not using Confucius, and he's pointing out to a Western ideologist. Why is he doing that? He's sending a message to President Trump, and he's saying, when 2 nations become so close in power, it is very difficult to avoid the conflict between them. And it will be between us to get away from that possibility. But at the same time, next to that comment, he's saying, and by the way, I'm going to take over Taiwan, and I don't want you to get in the middle of the process. So the Chinese message is very clear. And the US has to really focus on what is going to happen in the coming years. And one message that I have for the Trump administration is, in order to be stronger to face that challenge, you have to join forces with your neighbors and to complement your capacities in the production process. China and its production is being successful because they are building things within China, but also with their neighbors. And the future of trade is not the globalization that we were used to. Before COVID, we used to think that the best way to produce was where the cost was the lowest cost in the world. To give you an example, the motor of a Dreamliner being built in the US travels to 8 countries before it stops in Mexico, where they build the anti-pollution of noise part of the motor. That is not part of the future history. Now we are going to go regional, and we have to rely on our strength to really have national security and the capability of not having vulnerabilities in the supply chain in the world. Therefore, the challenge that we're facing now in the second negotiations for USMCA have to be clear. What are the problems that we're facing today? Mr. Trump, who had said that the first USMCA was the best agreement ever negotiated in the US, and he got rid of NAFTA, the first agreement, now he thinks he wants to change USMCA. But before start negotiating, he has imposed tariffs. And unfortunately for Mexico, tariffs on steel, aluminum, automobiles, auto parts, heavy trucks. Right now, those tariffs are basically hitting 33% of our exports to the US. Still 66% are free of tariffs. The main element in the process is that this is not only hurting Mexican production plants, it's hurting as well the 3 big companies in Detroit. So by doing this at the world level, we are making North American auto builders less competitive. Market share in the last 2 years of North American cars have been reduced by 6%, while Chinese market share at the world level has increased in the same percentage. So we have to be very careful in how we negotiate this process. Now, trying to take control of the time, what are the challenges ahead? First of all, we have to review the agreement in order to continue in July 1st. There is no possible way that the 3 countries will be ready to do so. Mr. Trump has a very peculiar way to negotiate, and he will withhold his endorsement of the agreement until his full agenda has been met. And that means, in contrast to when I was negotiating the agreement, he's mixing the same bag, security, migration, and trade, which is making this very difficult to process within 2026. What are the elements that you have to be looking for? And I believe this is your main task. You are going to have a midterm election, and the possibilities that things change after that election are big. I mean, the House of Representatives may not remain in control of the Republican Party. Therefore, it's very relevant in your discussions with congressmen to really make them aware that we need their focus and their attention on this process. So I believe the agreement will not be done before the November election, and we'll be discussing this in 2027. And your support on the process will be very, very relevant. Now, where I think these elements are going to land, the message coming from the White House is that, in contrast to the agreement that I negotiated, 0 tariffs and no restrictions in the free flow of goods is gone. They are basically saying that Canada and Mexico have to accept tariffs, mostly in manufacturing goods. I believe that that position should be resisted by Mexico and Canada, and in response to that, give Mr. Trump guarantees that the effort of integration of parts being made in North America to avoid other nations to take advantage of the agreement should be strengthened. To give you an example, in the agreement that I negotiated, 75% of a car, of the parts of the value of a car, had to be made in North America. Well, let's offer to Mr. Trump, push that integration to 85%. Why cannot be 100%? Because unfortunately, today, 7% of a car, or parts of a car, are not made in North America. The electronics, the microprocessors, batteries. So if we do want to strengthen our capacities, we should join forces, Canada, Mexico, and the US, to build intelligent import substitution. So we can build those elements that today are not being made in North America. But we cannot close our opportunity to integrate those elements today because we lose the race at the global level. Now, the other part of this deal that Mr. Trump wants to get is that a certain percentage of a car be made only in the US. How did I get around that, which was already present when I was negotiating with Lighthizer? At the beginning, they said we want half of a car be made in the US. Well, we introduced very creatively a solution saying, of the 75% of parts being made in North America, 40% have to be made in a region of salaries above $16 an hour, which basically reserves that part to the US and Canada, because as you know, salaries in Mexico are lower than that level. So, just to conclude, it will not be easy to get ratification. Mr. Trump will not ask or use the clause to get out of the agreement because he knows that in his own constituencies, the integration has been a big part of an economic story in the US. Just look at the process of consultations of USTR. About 1,500 comments coming from the private sector, all of them want the agreement to continue. And I do believe that at the end of the day, we'll keep the agreement, but we have to make sure that it gets closer to a free trade agreement, and this time around to make our best effort. There is a charter that describes the incentives for the small and medium business, that we should really make it happen with institutions that really facilitate financing and the possibility to make connections. Mexico knows and is aware of the relevance of the size of the product or the GDP that belongs to the Hispanic community in the US. By itself is bigger than several Latin American countries together. It will be a missed opportunity if this time around we don't take advantage of that opportunity. Thanks for your invitation. I'm sad that the time was so short, but I'll be available to the Chamber as a sign of gratitude of any consultations you want to make in order to make this work for the Hispanic community in the US and Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you, Ex-Secretario Guajardo Villarreal, for your remarks. Esteemed guest, to introduce our next keynote speaker, please welcome back USHCC Chair-elect, Mr. Victor Arias.
Okay, we'll try it again. Buenas tardes. Much better. God, you guys are good, man. Thank you again. Thank you, Ildefonso, Secretario, for your remarks. As we move into our second keynote on the USMCA and prepare for an historic MOU signing between the USHCC and the United States-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, we're taking a tangible step to align our institutions for the long term. It's about symbolism, but it's also about building a coordinated infrastructure of advocacy, information sharing, and business development that our members can count on. Al Zapanta grew up in Los Angeles and attended USC, a university where his father, Al Sr., also played football in the 1930s, and his uncle, Edward, was a trustee. Al also earned a degree at Harvard Business School and at the Inter-American Defense College at the National War College here in D.C. You see, Al served our country in the U.S. Army, and he served and earned the Silver Star, 5 Bronze Stars, 30 other awards, and the Purple Heart. That guy is unbelievable. However, Al will hardly ever say anything about that service or any details. And that just goes to show his spirit of service and his spirit of humility. General Al Zapanta, that's his level. General Al Zapanta also was named to that elite group of leaders called the White House Fellows. He also has formed various companies, successful companies, and the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, which he founded. And to continue his spirit of service, General Zapanta was just elected a little more than 2 weeks ago, the mayor of the city of Irving, one of the largest cities in Texas, and he won with almost 70% of the vote. Our next speaker, and Al, has been a steadfast champion of cross-border commerce and of the U.S.-Mexico relationship, and that's why we're signing this MOU a little bit later. So he spent years building bridges. That guy knows everybody. Everybody knows him in Mexico. So following his remarks, we'll formally sign our MOU, underscoring our shared commitment to strengthening the economy and the commercial ties that bind our nations together. It is my great privilege and honor to introduce the President and CEO of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber, General and Mayor Al Zapanta.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to hold it. How's that? You got it? Okay. There you go. Okay. Thank you, Ramiro. And a lot of my friends that I hope I can see out in the audience, but I saw some fellows that I knew out of Orange County. I see my buddy Mini Me. Are you still back there? That's an inside joke between Jose and I. I grew up in East LA. If anybody know where East LA is? How about City Terrace? Well, that's where my dad graduated from that grammar school, and so did I. And so we come from a part of the barrio that, if any of you know where that is, that it was kind of a tough place to grow up. And so I guess I had to earn my stripes going into the military, because my father, in fact, all our men were in the Second World War. My father was an infantry officer. And I'm really pleased that Victor brought up my father, because one of the things that we all aspire to do is really to have that role model. And I was very fortunate to have my father, Albert Sr., I'm Junior, and I have a son called AC, or Albert III. Interesting as you grow up and you remember some of the things that really imprint on your mind. And my father was the very first Mexican-American to be, and actually was awarded a football and track scholarship in 1935 from from USC. He was at Garfield High School at the time. And so he was quite an athlete. He played in the Rose Bowl in 1939 when they beat Duke, and he was alternate hurdler to the Olympic team that never went to the Olympics because of the Second World War in 1940. So that was my role model. And he said a few things to me over the years, and the thing I always remember about him was he said, "Your actions speak louder than your words. Don't ever forget it, son." And I think that, can I just rip this damn thing off? How's this? Okay. But that's part of how I grew up. He was an infantry officer in the Second World War, as with most of my family that went during that period of time. So the other side of it is, how does a guy from East Los get to where he got to? A lot of it was mentors. A lot of it was what I learned from my family, and how you really you achieve by doing. And starting at East Los Angeles Junior College after I graduated from high school, from Montebello High School, and then beyond that, USC, and then on to more education, and then the military. And so I served in Vietnam in 1969 and commanded a Ranger company as part of my Special Forces training. And that was 36 years of service. And I used to be 6'5", but after 100 parachute jumps, you see, look at what they did to me, man. Look at you, you remember. But I was fortunate at a time when there were only a couple of White House fellows that were selected. The first one was a fellow that you know, as the former mayor of San Antonio. And then, of course, the second, that was 71, 72, was a guy named Luis Nogales, and then I was 73. And that was then a long, kind of dry period. And so at this point, one of the things that I can get into a lot of funny things that you do when you're younger, but I can remember very clearly. That works. Okay. Got a lot of flojo things here, man. What's going on? Anyway, so I could go on and on, but what I really want to talk to you about is I was very fortunate. In 1974, we started the USC Mexican American Alumni Association. And we formed it because there was nothing to really help young Mexican Americans and Latinos as the years went on, and they changed the name of the association to the USC Latino Alumni Association. And so there were 8 of us that formed it. My father, myself, my 2 cousins, both doctors, Edward and Richard Zapanta. And I say that to you because it was something that we felt very strong. There are names that are not here anymore. And the sad part, I'm the only one walking around out of that 8. And to just tell you, I guess I still have a little bit of time on this earth. I turned 85 years old just about a month ago. And we just celebrated 56 years of marriage with my wife. So I'm saying that because I want you to understand something very important. You never make it alone. You make it with mentors, you make it with role models, and at the end of the day, con ganas. Okay? And have I always been successful? Yeah, I've had a few bumps in my time, but there's always going to be somebody or your family that'll help lift you or help you there. And so when you look at, why does a guy like me run for office at 85 years old, by the way, because I just took the oath of office on May 2nd. And what was really more interesting, and I think Victor said that it was the highest vote gotten from a mayor's race in that part of Texas, much less a Mexicano or Latino. And so what does that say to you? We have the opportunity, and you all here have the ability to be the bridge to this country of ours. Because we've always served, and I always like to say when I get, not in a group like this, but you're gonna, I think, understand what I'm gonna say. When I do get in a group to set the pace, I says, we never, in my family, never crossed the border. The border crossed us. Because a part of our country is exactly that. And so I never forget that. Let me now go to what, and I don't want to go much longer. How much time do I have? 2, 3 minutes? Whatever you want. No, then I'll really roll on you, okay? No, I'm here because I really want to just set the pace between Ramiro and I and Victor. And that is, I've run the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce now for about 32 years. I retired from ARCO, the oil company, as head of their government affairs. And I'm saying this to you because when you look at my last 4 years running the office here in Washington, D.C., as the senior lobbyist for one of the 5th largest oil companies, there was nobody with my last name in a major oil company at that level. And I say this to you because that's your challenge. That's what you have to aspire for. And at the same time, help your young people get there. And so, as part of this, one of the things as working between U.S.-Mexico business and our chamber that is now about 53 years old. We started in 74 also. And it was to bring U.S. and Mexican major businesses together. So it was 20 companies from the U.S. and 20 from Mexico. And our first chairman was David Rockefeller. And so it was Puro Mexicano and U.S. major corporations. When you think of the years that we have run and the years that it has been growing, and now we're at a point, and this is a reach out that I want to give Victor a big salutation, and Ramiro, because he and I visited about it. It's time that the two major chambers of commerce that represent us all in this hemisphere, mainly Mexico and U.S., Mexican Americans, Latinos, our two chambers, by signing this MOU, are going to be the most powerful political, economic development entity that has come together. And it's time. And let me tell you why. Number one, these big corporations, you're getting money from them. You know, all they're doing is checking the block. What they're really doing is saying, okay, we recognize the strength of the Latino community. But it's more than that. One of the things that I'm going to focus on as mayor is how do I help fill the supply chain of these major corporations with us? And you're part of that because you're the ones that have to deal with the small and medium-sized businesses. I'm dealing with a lot of the major corporations, but what we're finding is they're now wanting to be able to fill their supply chain because of what's happened to us with tariffs. You've heard Ildefonso, who's been one of my really dear friends, ever since 1994 when he was working for a fellow by the name of Jose Anjo Urria, and then President Zedillo when he first came into office. And I say that because that's history. That's also timing of where each of us could, in fact, end up. But right now, I think that I really see the ability for us to really bridge the Mexico business and the U.S. and Canada. I just finished a meeting with 8 of my board members with the 2 directors of the USTR, the Mexican or the U.S. dealing with Mexico and the fellow U.S. dealing with Canada. That's an area that you need to play. You heard Ildefonso talk about it. Well, why am I saying that? Because a lot of what's coming at us now with these U.S. corporations, they need help because of labor shortage, because what's going on ever since COVID, number one. Number two, and the tariffs in particular. But we're now seeing Mexican companies that want to come north more. I mean, it's not just the Mission Foods or Azteca, and I go on that are part of my Mexican side of our board, but it's really looking for those of you that are sitting in this audience and those of you that are running chapters or local areas. How do you help your small and medium-sized business? It's not about that only. It's about supplying these major corporations so that you're here in the good and bad times. Because when the bad times hit, and it's hitting right now, guess what? How many Mexican restaurants you know are closing? How many other small businesses are you seeing that are closing? Not because of any other reason, but the pressures of affordability and the pressures that are hitting them. So with that, I'm going to stop. Ramiro, I could probably roll on for a long time. But it's about us putting our strength together. I think it's time for our chamber to close ranks with your chamber and to see how do we build it together, because when you think of the political potential, and Jose Nino knows exactly what I'm talking because he's been in this seat and he's been a friend for many years. But at the end of the day, you know, if you don't deal with it and you don't deal with it up front, then they're not going to respect you. At the end of the day, it's our time. You know, I remember in the 80s, it was the decade of the Hispanic. Well, here we are, 40 years later, plus, is it really our decade yet? And at the end of the day, It's time for us to take the baton and do it and make sure they understand it, whether they like it or not. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House, number one. Number two, what it matters is how do we then grow and grow together. So thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, at this time, we invite to the stage for a ceremonial memorandum of understanding signing, recognizing a shared commitment to strengthening bilateral collaboration and expanding economic opportunity. President and CEO of the United States-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, General Al Zapanta, President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ramiro A. Cavazos, Chairwoman of the USHCC, Ms. Jackie Puente, and Chair-elect of the USHCC, Mr. Victor Arias.
Well, this is an exciting, historic moment. General Mayor, thank you again. Everybody wants to move to Irving, Texas now because of General Zapata, and they should. I'm very proud to have with us our chairwoman of the board, Jackie Puente. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you, Jackie. I want to also introduce, as you all met him earlier, he seems to have introduced everybody this afternoon himself, Victor Arias, our chair-elect. Thank you, Victor. The general was very kind. You heard him mention the Secretary of Mexico of the Economy, Ildefonso Guajardo, who spoke eloquently earlier about the importance of bilateral trade. His birthday was yesterday, and he and the general have worked together. The general had a board meeting today, and for years, you all know that these chambers, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, founded in '79, and of course the U.S.-Mexico Chamber, thanks to the general in the early '70s, there's nothing more important than collaboration and working together, especially within our Latino community. Our numbers have exploded 8 times since the '70s. Our economic power, it continues to be world-class. And each of you being here, I want you to know how much we appreciate your presence and your support. At this time, we'd like to formalize our partnership between the U.S. Hispanic Chamber and the U.S.-Mexico Chamber. We're going to do something with the general at a future meeting with the U.S.-Mexico Chamber, but we're very honored for your time today, General, and really serving as an inspiration and a maestro to many of us, because you mentioned mentorships, and the Japanese have a great saying that if you drink the water, remember who dug the well. And so we should always remember everyone that came before us and their contribution, and now it's our turn to do that. And so this MOU is emblematic of that, and I'd like to ask the General and Jackie Puente to help sign this agreement, to formalize it, and thank you all for being here. This now will be our conclusion subject before our welcome reception. Thank you all for being here, and of course we have Hill Day tomorrow. So with that said, General Jackie, thank you for your leadership, and Victor, and let's sign this agreement.
Thank you to all of today's speakers, partners, and attendees. This concludes the general session of the 2026 USHCC Legislative Summit.